Y'all had some questions though, like some information that y'all wanted to know, or anything about America or
The Gullah Geechee.
Gullah Geechee.
Yeah.
All right, what's your question on the Gullah Geechee?
Were they always here? Where were they located at? And was this their land first?
I hate to break it to you. And shout out to my Gullah Geechee out there, man. Y'all know I'm saying no big Indian
Shut
business,
up,
man.
yo.
But I gotta tell
It's
the
about to
real.
turn up a little bit. Come on. All right.
There's no such thing as a Gullah Geechee. The Gullah Geechee was made an African story created by white people, for one, okay? And we finna name some names tonight. So, Gullah Geechee are people off the Sea Island. It is stretched through Georgia up through South Carolina. 1526, the Spanish came over. It took them 8 attempts until they finally established themselves in Florida. And they had the help of Timucuan Indians. These Timucuan Indians, they were seafaring people. They were melanated people, just like us, copper people. You had Arawak, Taino. These are people out of the islands, or Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba played a great part. So you had different tribes like the Ukina, the Mayaka. You had these different people, and they built on Lake Okeechobee. So right now, what I'm doing is building up this area that they say that the Gullah Geechee are coming from. We started with the Spanish coming over in the indigenous tribes that was in that area. So Jacksonville, 1563, you would get Fort Caroline. The French will show up with Rabat. So they'll leave their settlement to be dismantled by 1565. On the Spanish 8th attempt, they would finally establish San Marcos, which would be built under Indian slavery of the Timucuan Indians. Like I said, these people built the shell mounds. They weren't necessarily agricultural. They built on the sea. They also were a stock of Mayans. You had Chippers Mayans out of Guatemala. You had Itza Maya, the Chantal Maya. So back then, Florida, it was much closer back then because some of that land is underwater right now. So you had the whole Gulf right there. Well, all the way up the Sea Islands, you had a big nation there called the Escamouco tribe. This nation fought off the Spanish settlement. Well, where they'll end up settling there, and they'll rival those in the Sea Islands of South Carolina, where it's all going to start. So the British is going to come in May 14, 1607. Jamestown, Virginia is named after King James of the Bible, which is a black man. 1603 united the crowns and ruled Scotland, Ireland, and England. Now, these are black people. This is the Stuart family. They're going to come from the Tudor family, which is Queen Elizabeth I. After she passed away, her cousin James, King James, took the crown. They'll settle in Virginia. The charters in the 13 colonies will be passed out by people that look like us. So you had Charles I, who will go through the English Civil Wars and die. Oliver Cromwell and the Protestants who killed him. His son, Charles II, who Charleston, South Carolina is named after, which is very important because this is what these Gullah Geechee people are going to be said to populate. So Charleston, South Carolina in 1670, that port will be created and is named after King Charles, known as the Black Boy King. After he will come back to the throne, they get New York from the Dutch, which was Dutch West Indies, 1621. And in 1626 with Peter Manute, that's when ODB, rest in peace, his family sold Manhattan to these people. So it'll be Peter Manute. So they end up going to war. Domestic Indian slave trade would start up in that area, up in New York. And it would travel down into the Great Lakes. In 1620s, to get to Virginia, we'll have a major fight there in Virginia. So what's going to happen is the 13 colonies is going to expand into the southeast. They're going to want to expand into the southeast. 1703, you get the Queen Anne War. Now they're fighting for Port Royal, South Carolina, and they're trying to get the port. This is all commercial business. I want y'all to keep that in mind too. They're only fighting for the ports that are operating in international trade. Very, very important we keep that in mind. So these nations down there, you're going to have an Indian, the domestic slave trade. Some people will show up in the late 1600s called the Goose Creek Men. They were allied with a people called the Yamasee. The Yamasee would become slave raiders. They would raid territory. It was about deer skin. So they would raid rival tribes or smaller tribes. Now, I do want to throw this out there not to make the Yamasee look bad because it was a point that the tribe that was coming out of Georgia, tribes coming out of Florida, they were at a point kidnapping people out of this area and bringing the Yamasee in as slaves. So now the tides have turned once the British got there for us. This population that's going to be down there in the Sea Islands is going to grow out of this. The Tuscarora War, 1711, 1713, 1715, you get the Yamasee War, and 1739, you get the Stono Rebellion, which they say happened by an African named Jeremy, and he kidnapped and ran away. All bullshit. All of the maps, there's a nation called Stono that actually traded in that area of Charleston. All the way through the 1600s and the 1680s, they went to war with them for their territory. They were like a thorn in their side. 1740, they passed the Negro Act, which put them in a of servitude and put laws on these individuals for this ride that the Indians caused in 1739. So we're going to get to 1754 is the French and Indian War of 1763. The French will lose all of their trade port to the British. In 1733, James Oglethorpe will come over, who was a defender of the Stewart family, the Jacobites, and found in Darien County, Georgia, and then they'll get Savannah. This will give them an opportunity to attack Florida now. Very important, walking it down. Long story short, the Indians that migrate down into Florida and Georgia area, they'll be attacked by Andrew Jackson. They wanted this area down there because they were moving from deerskin. It went from beaver pelt to deerskin, and now it's moving to agriculture. So we get down here, this population of Indians are moving downward into the south, getting away from this encroachment or these Indian raiders. And so they're going to make a confederation together to come together. In 1803, you get the Louisiana Purchase. 1807, you get the 11, you get the First Creek Civil War down there. You had the Red Stick War first, that's the Creek. And then 1815, you got Fort Mill, Horseshoe Bend, and you had Fort Jackson. Those that lost in Georgia and Fort Jackson went to Florida in 1816, they became what's called the Seminole Indians. So you have these people that came and amalgamated together, different nations that was there, who was going to fight off this newly United States 13 colonies who looked to expand. And so they wanted to come down and control the resources. Now let's fast forward. Let's get into the real information. The first person to ever mention a Gullah Geechee was a guy by the name of John Bennett, a white boy. He was an American author who was best known for children's books. He wrote and illustrated some, especially drawing from the Gullah culture. He is considered to be the leading figure of the Charleston Renaissance. The next time we hear what is popular for, later they'll call him Gullah Geechee. Now you have the Geechee River down there, which the name Geechee actually derives from. So it's not coming from Africa. They said it comes from Angola. That theory came from a fiction book wrote by a white woman named Julia Peterkin. This is going to be created in the 20th century when they're going to start Africanizing things. Now, with the Gullah Geechee, you're going to have a program that's going to come through called eugenics. Now, the eugenics program is going to have an offspring program that's going to fund a guy named Franz Boas, who's the father of anthropology in America. Franz Boas is going to have his student is going to be a guy by the name of Melville Herskovich. He's the father of African studies. Okay, he's a white who's the father of African studies. I want people to understand this here. It wasn't a black man that came and told you that you had a culture and your culture was Africa. It was this guy. So at the time you had philanthropists come out. So you had the Peabody, starting with the Peabodys. After the Civil War and the Reconstruction era, they're going to get together with these bankers and they're going to take over the Collegiate Institute. They're going to get all of these teachers on the payroll, so much to the Senate had to step in and make everyone open up the files to see who was on payroll. Because what they did was came in and reconstructed history. So you had Rockefeller create the University of Chicago. A lot of quote unquote black leaders will go through this University of Chicago where they basically went in there and reconstructed history. And this is what Afrocentrism comes. And so now this history, this lost history of the black man, this is where we're going to start getting all of this history from. This Africanized history from Africa, the slave stories and all of these, such as the Gullah Geechee, right? Now, Melville Herskovich is going to have a student by the name of Lorenzo Dow Turner. He's going to be known as the father of the Gullah Geechee. He's going to go around to collect data in different areas on these people. Now, he say he heard a Christian song called the Word Shout Song. And he said this is the connection that he made and said that the language that he heard from the people in the Sea Island is the same as the people in Africa. Now, before he died, he didn't make the what had to happen was a white boy had to come. Joseph Apollo. He's going to come back in the 80s and say that he deciphered it and he's figured out the missing piece that Lorenzo Dow Turner and Melville Herskovich was missing because they was using the Christian hymn. In the 90s, this is who they're going to give it to. So your Gullah Geechee, I'm sorry, these are the founders of your Gullah Geechee, white folks. And it's not a problem with it, but they Africanized the story that was really happened to the indigenous people here.